Good afternoon, members of the FOIC.
So, committee members, is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay. I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, this passes unanimously. Let's move to item number 2. Discussion and action on Texas Department of Transportation State Infrastructure Bank Loan options for local match requirements for federally funded transportation projects funded through the Metropolitan Planning Organization. Good afternoon, Joaquin.
Hello, good afternoon.
IT, can you bring up the presentation for item 2, please? So again, good afternoon, Joaquin Rodriguez with the Capital Improvement Department's grant-funded program director. My group oversees all grant-funded program activities as they relate to capital improvements specifically. We wanted to start this presentation by giving you an overview first of what our program does, what types of projects we are responsible for, and then go into what we have developed as a funding strategy for our local match requirements for these projects. So primarily our group focuses on executing federally and state-funded transportation projects. That includes projects that are programmed by the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, programs that we work hand-in-hand with TxDOT on. We also work closely with discretionary grant programs like RAISE, essentially anything coming through the Department of Transportation, as well as Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration. We also work closely with the rest of the Capital Improvements Department to support some of the larger transportation projects, because our group's specialty really is horizontal construction of infrastructure improvements. Specifically, we're working with capital improvements on the Community Progress Bond, connectivity projects, and then we also oversee long-range transportation planning and safety initiatives like Vision Zero and Complete Streets. Next slide, please. Are they back there? There we go. So a little bit of history on how our grant-funded program is funded. Between 2018 and 2024, we've executed approximately $117.5 million in projects at a cost of a little over $32 million to the city in local match dollars. That percentage of local match is about 27% of the project total. So as you can see, our department really is a force multiplier when it comes to city funds and drawing down federal funds to make the most of what's available to our region from the federal government. In the past, our department, in terms of our match requirements and doing design work and other project development work, has historically been funded by certificates of obligation. In 2017, $7.7 million was issued. In 2018, $10.9 million was issued to support MPO match projects. There was then sort of a drought of funding for our projects. We were able to keep things afloat using project savings and some of those older COs. In 2024, we needed to come up with a strategy to fund some immediate needs for our projects. So we, working with Mr. Cortines and his group and City Council, we came up with a strategy to use capital asset sales funds for our MPO match for FY24 and 25. Those are the amounts that were authorized for use from capital asset sales for those 2 years, FY24 and 25. Next slide, please. What we want to talk about today are SIB loans. The TxDOT State Infrastructure Bank offers low-interest loans for transportation infrastructure projects. Specifically, those loans are eligible projects for these loans are projects that are authorized under Title 23 of the U.S. Code, so that's essentially MPO funded and programmed projects. The funds are available for both construction and reconstruction of facilities. We can include eligible project activities like right-of-way acquisition, utility relocation, The loans are also available for contingency, local match, and any financial or legal advisory fees that are associated with those federally eligible projects. Next slide, please. This is a brief overview of folks in our region who are using SIB loans. Many of them are managed by the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority. El Paso County, Horizon City, Socorro, and Anthony are also using the State Infrastructure Bank to fund complete projects as well as their local match for MPO-funded projects. The El Paso projects, there are projects that are completed already that utilize State Infrastructure Bank loans as well. Next slide. So there are some benefits to using SIB loans. Primarily, they are fixed low interest rate loans. There are zero lending costs and no application fees associated with these loans. There's a short timeline to funding. The entire process from council approving a resolution to apply for the loan to execution of the loan through the Texas Transportation Commission is about 6 to 8 months. Additionally, entities in economically disadvantaged counties receive an interest rate discount. El Paso County does qualify for a significant interest rate discount through the SIB policies. But primarily, the reason we're bringing them forward, they serve as a alternative to one-time funding from capital asset sales. Capital asset sales we don't really view as a sustainable source of funding for the MPO match portfolio. We don't know when sales will occur. It's not a predictable source of funds. So the SIB loans offer us a more predictable and sustainable alternative to those one-time funds. Next slide, please. This slide goes into some detail on how the interest rate is calculated by the SIB. They use the Municipal Market Index to set interest rates. That's an index that's updated weekly. That's really just a caveat for you all. These numbers on this slide and in this presentation are subject to fluctuations in the MMD. So interest rates are set at the time of application, and they're based on the entity's current credit rating, as well as the term of the loan. I mentioned earlier, El Paso does qualify as an economically distressed community, so that reduction is 55 basis points. The city's current credit rating is AA, I believe. So there's a 10 added basis points to a AAA rated loan based on our current credit rating. Next slide, please. So we wanted to highlight one of the loans that we'll be pursuing with this strategy. This is for the Sean Haggerty project in the Northeast, a large bridge project. The total loan amount, including utility relocation and contingencies, would be $7.36 million. And this is a breakdown of what those interest rates look like for the 10, 15, 20, and 25-year terms. In speaking with the city's financial advisors and with Mr. Cortinas and his team, we do feel that the 25-year term makes the most sense for the city at this time. Next slide, please. So a quick overview on the entire SIB loan timeline. Again, 5 to 7 months for the TxDOT process. The city process of bringing a resolution forward to council adds about 1 or 2 months to that timeline. So overall, around 8 months for application completion. Council resolutions are required for both submitting the application, and then a second resolution would be required to execute the final loan agreement. We're currently working with legal on drafting a resolution that would allow council to authorize us not just for a single loan, but for an entire group of loans that would fund us for the next 3 years. Next slide, please. So this, I won't go through this line by line, but these are currently SIB loan eligible projects within the MPO funded portfolio. We are able to do single loan agreements for larger projects and then group the smaller projects. So the large projects you see here, Sean Haggerty, that project is ready to go for construction. We're just waiting on some final utility relocations by El Paso Electric. Some of our other larger projects coming up are the TMC upgrades. That's our traffic management center upgrades citywide. Central Business District 4 are bicycle and pedestrian and streetscape improvements within Segundo Barrio. Other big projects like Railroad Drive, our Safe Streets for All grant that was awarded recently, Buffalo Soldier, and Sun Valley Drive improvements. Those would be our larger projects that we'd go after in single loan agreements. And then some of our smaller projects, which are really focused on the transportation alternative projects, so bicycle and pedestrian projects, are projects that we could group together into one loan agreement for multiple projects. So the total, and this gets us out to FY28, which is the extent of our fiscally constrained project list with the MPO, would be a little over 39 million in loans over those next 3 fiscal years. And as you'll see there, I can't read it from this distance, but that does help us draw down a large amount of federal funds for the region using a much smaller amount of local funds. Next slide, please. I won't go into too much detail on this slide, Robert. I don't know if you want to jump up and present this, but this is the impact of that amount of loan funds over the next 3 years, what impact that has on our debt service property tax rate.
Cover the next presentation.
Okay, perfect. We can wait till the next presentation, but we want to include it here just for the benefit of the public. Next slide. So our next steps, we had intended to bring the Sean Haggerty resolution to council on April 14th. Again, the resolution for application is sort of the first step, and then we submit that application to the SIB for their review, and then come back for another resolution for the actual execution of the agreement. What we have been working on over the past few days is actually, instead of submitting an individual loan for Sean Haggerty, or an individual resolution to council, we're working on that resolution to give city manager and staff authority to apply for loans for all of those projects that you saw on the previous slide over the next 3 years. Next slide, please. There we go. So our recommended action from this committee today is to recommend approval to council of use of SIB loans to fund the MPO match as an alternative to capital asset sales, and approval of a resolution to submit loan applications for loan match requirements through fiscal year 28 for up to $39.12 million. Happy to answer any questions. We think, collectively as a group that this is a good strategy moving forward to fund our requirements for the MPO match. As you know, our portfolio really focuses on drawing down as much federal funding as possible and multiplying these city dollars so that we're putting the most work on the ground as we can.
Thank you, Joaquin. Before we get into discussion, I just wanted to apologize for an oversight of mine. We did not do the Pledge of Allegiance. So can we do the Pledge of Allegiance and then get into discussion? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Representative Chavez, do you have a...
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Joaquin, for that wonderful presentation. My question is in regards to slide 10, where it says the project names and the year of the expenditure. When it says year of expenditure, does that mean that that's going to be the year that those projects are also completed, or?
No, so the year of expenditure is actually the year that we will let the projects, the year that we'll actually bid them out. The year of expenditure is when we'll actually need to start spending money to pay a contractor on the projects. Most of these larger projects have between an 18 and 24-month timeline for construction. So that year of expenditure is the year that will make sort of the first payment to the contractor, and then the loan will carry us through to the end of the project. Any funds approved in the loan agreement that aren't used for the project then get returned to the SIB at the completion of the project.
Okay. And if we wanted to get more details on one specific project name, we could just contact you?
You could contact me or ask me right now. Either one is good.
Okay. Well, I'm just looking at the one that's in my district on the bottom, Shadow Mountain. I don't know how far, because I know that street's pretty big, so I don't know the length of that project.
So the Shadow Mountain SUP, and sorry for all the abbreviations, is a shared use path. Shadow Mountain was a project we were awarded through the last year's call of the Transportation Alternatives Program. So that's actually a shared use path that extends the Sunland Park shared use path, which is already funded and under design, extends it north of Mesa up to essentially after you get past all the multifamily properties. There's a logical terminus there, and the idea is to connect all of those multifamily properties to the shared use path on Sunland Park and eventually all the way south to the commercial district there.
Oh, okay. If I could get more information about that later, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Representative Maldonado Rocha.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate it. Thank you, Joaquin, for the informative presentation. Thank you. My gosh, why did I lose my words on that? I have a question though. So this is in conjunction with the TxDOT projects. Is that correct?
So it's associated with TxDOT projects in that federally funded transportation projects that the city executes, those funds pass through TxDOT to us. These are projects that are all on local streets. They're not projects within TxDOT right of way, but the connection between TxDOT is that they all pass through TxDOT for us to execute. TxDOT oversees our compliance with federal requirements for constructing these projects, and the SIB itself is a part of TxDOT, so it's the TxDOT State Infrastructure Bank. It's essentially a revolving loan fund created by TxDOT to help local communities fund these federally funded projects.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. I have a quick question on the shared use path, which is the one for McRae, because I know that one is in District 3. That's a huge project that people in the neighborhood do want. My question, I know that it says phase 1 and 2. How many phases are there? Are there only 2?
Currently programmed are only 2 phases.
Okay, I recently reached out to TxDOT because we were requesting a timeline, and I see that this is fiscal year of 26. However, TxDOT's portion will not be done until I believe 2032 is what I heard. And so I know that that's only 6 years difference, but I'm trying to understand like the correlation between how we do our projects and then TxDOT does their portion of the project as well.
So I'm not familiar with what TxDOT's portion of the McRae Shared Use Path is. McRae Shared Use Path Phase 1 and Phase 2, as far as my group is concerned, it's an application we submitted to the Transportation Alternatives Program 2 years ago, and were awarded for both phases, which were originally meant for 2 different fiscal years. We actually combined those bids, open bids actually just recently. Contract has not been awarded yet, but we'll be building phase 1 and phase 2 simultaneously.
Okay.
We also designed them together.
It could be the resurfacing piece of it for McRae, so I'll get clarification on my part.
Okay.
I'm just trying to link them all together. So I appreciate the explanation on that. Thank you.
I'll have my staff follow up with your office
Yes,
on
that'd be
the
great.
cross sections, and we did do a public meeting last year
Right.
for the project. So we'll be sending out construction notices within the next few months here as we gear up for construction.
Okay, thank you so much.
Representative Nino.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Joaquin, for the great presentation. Question for you. You're requesting action today. However, does this action then forward the action to council to make the final decision, or is this a final decision that takes place today?
The action we're requesting today is that you all recommend approval of this strategy to council. Council will be taking final action on the resolution, authorizing us to submit these applications.
Okay, recommend. Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's my question.
So I had a few thoughts on this. I think the matching of grants has been really important to me when it comes to transportation projects, and so I'm glad to see all of these projects here. What I do have an issue with is authorizing $39 million just in one motion for the next 3 years. And that's where I'm getting a little heartburn with this. I feel like there needs to be a better strategy on this. I see that there's one for fiscal year 25, right? And then there's a few for 26, a few for 27, a few for 28. Giving that authority just in one motion makes me feel uncomfortable. I think it's losing a lot of oversight, and maybe there's a better way to group them. I could see the smaller projects that are here, like the downtown bicycle infrastructure, connected bike lanes, stuff like that, would make more sense to me to go after them. But if we authorize this at a future council meeting, then we're not gonna come back every year and
Yeah,
So
we
what-
actually are. We're going to come back. So what we've been looking at is really, by having you say that the 39 million, the strategy makes sense, we're trying to find a sustainable way to really address these projects. And so then we'll know that we have the authority to go after and have a funding source for these. But then every time we come for an application, whether we group them or not, it comes to council twice. So
So-
you'll see the application, the pre-application, and then you'll see the executed documents for each one of those groupings.
So one clarification, what we'd like to do is have authority to submit the applications. So have authority for us to submit all 39 million of the applications over the next 3 years, but council will still see that second step of the resolution every time, which is the final execution of the loan agreement. So council would be approving one resolution for all the applications, and then in the future, another resolution for each individual loan agreement.
okay, so it doesn't give you just all the authority. We'll hear about every single loan coming to us.
Correct. And,
Okay.
and one other part of this, all of the projects in our portfolio, council has approved along the way through the advanced funding agreement with TxDOT. So you've already made the commitment for the city to execute that project, and we've already committed to that local match. So these aren't projects that my team is pulling out of thin air. These are already projects that have been committed to by the city and programmed by the Transportation Policy Board of the MPO.
Yeah, no, I think that clarifies a lot, and I appreciate it. Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion, and I see Rep. Chavez, you have something to say? Oh, you said second. Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, this passes unanimously. Thank you so much. Okay, let's move on to item number 3, discussion and presentation on the City of El Paso's FY 2026-2030 debt service. Mr.
afternoon.
Cortinas, good afternoon.
So this presentation is a sort of a follow-up to the 5-year forecast presentation that we did a few weeks ago. As we begin to develop the FY 2026 budget, this presentation is really going to cover the next several years related to the City of El Paso's debt service. I have with me today Maria Urbina. She is the Managing Director with Hilltop Securities, our financial advisor. And so she's going to actually take on a few of the slides here a little bit later in the presentation and cover some of the opportunities that we have in regards to some refunding opportunities. So here's the agenda. We're going to cover several different items, cover a little bit about our debt management policy, really to provide some overview as to what we use when we're developing the city's debt service issuances for upcoming, not only new issuances, but also looking at refunding opportunities. I'm going to show you a little bit about our current debt situation that we have, a little bit of a recap on recent transactions, covering again some of our existing debt and the maturities, some of the challenges that we're going to face over the next few years, and then some good news on some upcoming transactions that would potentially save the city some money as far as borrowing cost. So the importance of debt management, no different than what you all have heard us say over and over and over again. Really, it's about the long-term strategic planning. How are we utilizing our policies to really help sort of guide the direction, the recommendations that we have, again, to secure that long-term financial responsibility that we have for the organization. Utilizing our debt capacity really helps to identify those future bond projects, the current bond projects that we have in the queue, and also, as I mentioned, minimizing our borrowing costs, which is probably the most important thing, right? And so I know we're going through a lot of uncertainty right now, market volatility. Maria will speak to that a little bit when she gets to her slide. Some crazy things going on in the world right now, which impacts not only our refunding opportunities, but also the future issuance cost. Some of the numbers that we have included in this presentation. Our debt management policy, again, just something that you all will see in the very near future as well. We bring this to the council biannually. Really lays out the foundation for how we go about issuing new debt, what type of debt portfolio we have, the types of permissible uses of debt that we have. And as I mentioned, this is brought to council every other year. Some of the limits that are specified in the debt management policy Three key measures that we utilize and that we continue to monitor. And so one of them is the total principal amount compared to our total tax supported debt. That is a cap of 10%. We're currently only at 2.8%, so well below that. The second one there, this is in the debt management policy as well, the net direct debt service as a percent of our net operating revenue. So really ensuring that we have adequate funds to be able to make our debt service payment and that we're not putting pressure on the budget to be able to meet the debt service requirements. And you can see that cap is 20% and we're only at 10% currently. And then finally, the last one there, this is a cap on the overall debt service tax rate that we have. Currently the debt management policy at 40 cents. This was set by council. This was actually increased over the last decade or so as the 2012 Quality of Life Bond was passed, and then followed by the 2019 Public Safety and the 2022 Community Progress Bond. So it has increased from 25 cents up to 40 cents. You can see currently we're only at 23 cents, and as we go through the presentation, I'll show you later, we're projected to stay well below that 40 cents and not come anywhere near going near that maximum cap currently in the policy. Just a very, very high level overview of the roles. There's many, many more roles. Otherwise, this slide would have been very messy. We have obviously the city attorney's office that plays a key role. Our bond counsel plays a key role as well. But really, the city is the issuer, and so we are the ones essentially that are the experts in managing municipal government. But we don't know everything that it takes to actually be an expert in municipal bond issuance. That's why we rely upon our financial advisor. We rely upon their expertise to help with the actual structuring of the bonds, helping us with the analysis. We utilize the underwriters. We have a pool of underwriters that the city council approves. They really help are the ones that actually go out and help trade the bonds, and then obviously the investors are the ones that are purchasing the bonds. Overall breakdown of our outstanding debt. So we have our general obligation bonds, 967 million, certificates of obligations, 477.6. Our revenue bonds, which are the airport supported revenue bonds, and then the special revenue bonds, that 59.3 million, which is related to the ballpark. One of the big things that we've really focused on, and very, very proud that we have continued to not only maintain our AA bond rating status, but actually with Kroll, we did our first rating with them a couple of years ago, and we were able to actually get an upgrade from the AA up to a AA plus, which as you can see on the scale on the right hand side there in that box, AA plus, again, very, very low credit risk. Again, something that we strive to ensure that not only maintaining, but that we're pushing to actually work to try to increase our bond rating because it does help bring down our overall borrowing cost. This slide here is really just to highlight two things. One, on the left-hand side on the pie chart there, the breakdown of our overall property tax rate. So the property tax rate is broken up into two components. The operating and maintenance component, which is the general fund, makes up about 70%. The debt service portion of the tax rate, again, just over 23 cents, equates to about 30% of the overall property tax rate. And then on the right-hand side, you can see over the last 5 years what the debt rate has done, continued to decrease year over year. The last 2 years really been able to decrease the debt rate due to not doing new issuances over the last couple of years. We've been utilizing bond proceeds on hand. However, that's going to change with the coming year as we are projecting to do a new money issuance to be able to fund the community progress and public safety bond projects for next year. So some of the key things or key challenges that we're facing, again, really highlighting the importance of how we manage our debt going forward. One of the things I'll show you a little bit later in this presentation is our current debt. So we currently do not have any maturities until the end of FY 2031. And so I'll show you what that looks like. So essentially that means that we don't have any existing debt that will be paid off until 2031, which is 6 years from now. Additionally, we have 2016 bonds, the general obligation bonds that were issued with 10 years of interest only. And so next year we have a $7 million increase in those particular bonds because we start paying principal on those bonds. And so that's creating a little bit of additional burden on the overall debt service rate for FY 2026. Additionally, and I'll show you the breakdown of that remaining $472 million on the GO voter-approved debt and what that's going to look like over the next few years. As I mentioned, fluctuating interest rate market. It's been all over the place the last couple of weeks. Seen a little bit of up, a little bit of down, and kind of a crazy time that we're facing right now and a lot of uncertainty related to the bond market. We have the threat to tax-exempt bonds. Currently, the federal government is looking at potentially doing away with the tax-exempt bonds, which would obviously increase the cost to borrow. And then obviously, as I mentioned, ensuring that we're being fiscally sound in how we manage not only our budget but our debt to ensure that we, again, maintain or look to improve our bond rating. So with all that, with all of those challenges, here's what we've done to be proactive and address, again, how we manage our debt. Started with, this is only going back to August of 2023, so we've done many more prior to that, but really in the last couple of years, have really been proactive and really forward-thinking in how we're going to bring down not only our existing debt, but how we're going to minimize the impact going forward on the future issuances that we still have to do over the next several years. So the payoff of the transportation reinvestment zone number 2. So that did two things. So one, it paid off about $40 million of principal. 2, it saved about $21 million of interest. And then 3, what that did is it created revenue that was previously restricted that became unrestricted to the tune of about $8 million a year that now comes to the general fund. So it really did a benefit multiplier of where we were able to accomplish 3 things with that issuance or with that action. The second one, last year we did a cash defeasance. So essentially we took our debt service reserves and we made future payments on 2 different issuances in 2027 and 2028. And so what that did is really help smooth out our future impact on the overall debt service rate. And so you'll hear us again talk a lot about the recommendations we bring are all about that forward looking, ensuring that we're really minimizing the impact over the short and medium term. And so we were able to do that to help smooth out the debt rate so that we're not impacting our taxpayers over the next several years. We paid out the Plaza Theater debt 3 years early, about $3.6 million. That again frees up about $1 million every year to the general fund now. That was previously again restricted, it now becomes unrestricted. The multi-purpose center defeasance, which the council approved back at the end of last year, we actually disclosed on that defeasance, so that money is now in, or will be in escrow. It was $34.2 million, and actually the savings that we're generating is almost $53 million in bonds that we won't have to issue over the next several years. And then the 2024 refunding that we did last year, a small refunding, but again generated about $3.7 million of savings over the life of those bonds. So again, all of these actions, about $136 million that we're able to bring down not only our debt cost currently, but then also as we look to the future as well, minimizing the impact. So I talked about this, the debt maturity. So I'm going to jump right into sort of what we are facing. As I mentioned, this is the list of all of the current issuances that we have. You'll see the actual listing on the left-hand side, the maturity date, and then on the far right-hand column there is the years to maturity. This is important again because it's important that as we're forecasting, as we're looking to the future, look into when we actually have debt that will be retired. And as you can see on this list here, and as I mentioned, our next debt that'll be paid off won't be until the year 2031. You'll see at the very, very bottom there, the average years to pay off is about 16 years. So again, something that we just continue to monitor, build into our forecast, and again, account for these things when we're making recommendations on how to minimize the impact on the tax rate going forward over the next several years. This slide shows you our total debt service requirement over the next several years going out to 2034. You can see 2025 through 2028 relatively flat. As I mentioned, we did do that defeasance for 2027 and 2028. So essentially what we did is we brought down those costs by about $6.5 million in each of those years. Otherwise, you would have seen 2027 and 2028 be add $7 million to each of those, 127 and then 128 million in those 2 years. So again, we did that defeasance in order to keep that debt service requirement flat over the next 4 years, but you can see once you get to FY 2029, that amount starts to increase. Again, once we take into account the new issuances or the current principal payments that we have and the current structuring of the existing debt. So as we look to future refundings, one of the things that we'll work to do is begin to adjust some of those increases we have in 2029 and beyond. So as we get to talking about refinancing and restructuring, obviously we take advantage of the benefit if we are able to refinance some of our existing debt. Our bonds have call dates, which Maria talked a little bit about. And that really is an opportunity for us to be able to refinance those bonds in order to bring down the cost of our debt service and then obviously help us with minimizing the impact in the future. But this is what we have as far as callable opportunities. So essentially, every bond has call dates built in. You can see in FY 2025, we do have about 94 million in current refunding debt that's available to be refinanced. Next year in FY 2026, about 332 million. You can see in 2027, we had no opportunity to refinance any of that debt in 2027. And so that was, again, one of the reasons why we did that defeasance in FY 2027. And so as we structure future debt, we'll begin to work to plug some of these holes in the future so that we do have opportunities to be able to take advantage of any savings. Again, it's all dependent upon the market. Even if bonds are callable, we're able to do a refinancing. If the market rate isn't favorable, obviously we will not take advantage, or we wouldn't take action on doing that refinancing at that time. But we do have opportunities, and so Maria will cover those on the next couple of slides, opportunities that we have to do some refundings. After she's finished, I'll go through the planned issuances for the remaining public safety and community progress bond projects that we have. Talk a little bit more about the SIB loans, which you all just heard from Joaquin. And then finally, the very last item there is looking at TERS 9 and how we can, one, create some revenue that's currently restricted, and how we can utilize that to become unrestricted and help us with the budget for next year. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Urbina.
Good afternoon, council members. Can everybody hear me? So good afternoon. My name is Maria Urbina with Hilltop Securities. And just to give a little bit of background for those that don't know about our firm, Hilltop Securities is a municipal investment firm. We're national. We've got 40 offices throughout the nation, and one including El Paso. For myself, I'm very happy because I get to work and live in the place that I call home. So I'm very happy to be here. So thank you. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about, I think Robert has mentioned a lot about bonds and refundings, but I think what I do want to mention a little bit is the relationship about the municipal advisor and the city. As Robert mentioned, it's a very critical relationship because as municipal advisors, we have the expertise. We're an extension of your staff. So we have the expertise in the municipal industry. We see transactions day in and day out. So it's very important because we help bring that information to your staff. Now, before I jump into the actual presentation, I want to give you just a very basic, obviously for the audience, an understanding about what a municipal bond is. So a municipal bond is a security, and it's a security that cities such as the city of El Paso can use to issue debt, and that's the way that you can fund big capital projects, okay? Typically, these are funded through 20 to 30 years, and for the most part, the city's been issuing about 25-year debt. Now, a bond typically carries what they call a call feature, and I know that Robert went through that a little bit, but what it basically means is that within 9 to 10 years after you issue bonds, you can't do anything with those bonds until the 9 or 10 years, okay? So you can't really refinance until you're getting close to that call date. That's important. As a city, it's good for you to know that there's 3 major reasons why you would want to refund money. And that is to either restructure existing debt payments, whether you save money or not, so it's important for you to know that, to either change bond covenants on existing documents, or at the same time to reduce overall savings, which debt service payments, and that is what we're here to discuss today. So a refinancing is the same as a refunding, and that's really more of the municipal, municipal world jargon. And so basically what we're trying to do here is to replace old bonds with high coupons with new bonds with lower interest. And that way you can basically pay off those old bonds and save some money. It's very similar to what you do if you have a home and you go out and you refinance. So that's all that we're talking about here today. So on this next slide, what I'm talking about, so right now the city has probably about 20 bond issues in the general obligation side. And when we're looking at a refunding, we can't look at all of your bonds to refund for savings. The IRS is very clear that there's only you can only refund debt that's either near or past your call date. Okay, so in this case, we have there's 4 bond issues that we're looking at. So I'm going to go over the first series here. So we've got the 2015s, which you'll see right there. That's roughly about approximately $80 million or so that we're looking at coming due for call date on 8/15 of 2025. Now, those are what you would call a current refunding. So just remember that when you refund those, you have to be within 90 days of the call date. That's when the IRS allows you to issue refundings on a tax-exempt basis. So we're looking at those 2 series as a current refunding. Now, what I want to show you now are the 2 next series, which are the 2016s. Those ones are roughly around, if you add those 2 series, that's about roughly about $250 million of bonds that you can actually potentially look for refunding. Now, what I will tell you right now is that because they're not close to their call date, we can consider doing a bond tender refunding, okay? And so you've done one in the past, back in 2023, so this is something that you've already done. But what that basically means is that that refunding is subject to people actually turning in or giving up their bonds. So we can't refund $250 million, all right? It's only the bonds that they can actually tender at that time. So we're going to show you on the next slide what that basically means. We ran a scenario for you so you could see more or less based on the market conditions in March of 17. Obviously, we're already in April, but we've been tracking the market. It had been pretty stable until, well, it hasn't been pretty stable. It's been volatile, but it had been somewhat stable over the past couple weeks until this week, where everything just went out the window. But basically what we're showing you is a refund opportunity that you can consider. So what we are looking at in front of you here is a current refunding of the 2015 series and a bond tender of the 2016. So we're assuming a 20% participation on the tender. And so the key statistics that I think really matter to you are right at the hand side. So you'll see that the total gross savings that we're looking at potentially to save about $7.5 million, which is a net present value savings of about $5.6 million, which translates to about 4.75%. Now, the estimated borrowing cost obviously was based on a couple weeks ago of 3.5%. And so what we want to show you right now is obviously the next slide, which if you were to consider moving forward with a refunding, we would go to your council and give a formal presentation and request for a parameters authorization. And I'm sure some of you have heard about that. But what it basically is, it's an authorization that gives your staff the ability to go out and price the bonds at a specific date and time within a parameter. And what we have in front of you is the list of parameters that we have basically discussed with your staff members that we would propose at this point. Obviously, we're going to be, let me talk a little bit about what this parameter is, and then I'll tell you about the actual parameters. But what you would do with this parameter authorization is give your staff members, in this case it would be your city manager and your CFO, the authorization to actually execute on the transaction. The actual parameters deal with the actual deal in particular. Now, we look at the maximum true interest cost, the par amount of the bonds, and we also look at the minimum. In this case, because we're looking at saving money, we're going to put a floor in terms of the minimum savings for this transaction. And so I'm not going to go over those right now because the market has changed, and what I'm showing you right now is not what we're going to be able to get at this point. However, we want to make sure that we run the numbers when we actually come to you and ask for this, and I'll give you a better approximation of where we stand. Unfortunately, the market is just not very helpful at this point. However, we still feel that moving forward with a parameter authorization is probably the right thing to do, and therefore when we do actually go out into a market, if we can actually achieve savings, then the city has the ability to capture those at that point. And with that, the next steps, like I said, I mean, I think, we've gone over a lot of the numbers. If the council, if this is something that you feel that we could approach the council with, we would look at approaching your council on June, and then potentially pricing in July and closing in September. And so I think that is what we're looking at right now. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know that Mr. Cortina still has some slides to go. We can answer those questions at the end if that works for you. Is that good?
That works. Thank you.
Okay, so the next few slides. So this slide is showing the breakdown of the remaining 2019 public safety, the 2022 community progress, and incorporating the SIB loans that we've just discussed. Total of $511 million. You can see by year here what we're planning to issue. These amounts will change as the budget staff and the comptroller staff work with our capital improvement department, just based on the cash flow and the amounts that they'll need on a given year for continuing to fund the capital projects so that we don't hold them up. But this is what we're using right now as far as an estimate for each of those years. As we mentioned, the SIB loans and really the benefit to doing those, really identifying a long-term solution, a funding source to be able to put up the match. As Joaquin mentioned, those projects have been approved by council, so now it's identifying the funding source. We had brought to council last year, utilizing he referenced the capital sales. Essentially what that was is the money that we've accumulated through the sale of city property, so it's a one-time revenue source. We believe that by doing the SIB loans provides a more sustainable source of funding for that match, and then provides flexibility for that money that we receive from the sale of those properties for other priorities. So looking at tax increment reinvestment zone number 9. So similar to what we've done over the last couple of years, I mentioned the transportation reinvestment zone number 2 that we were able to pay off early. We actually did terminate TRZ 10A a couple of years ago as well. And so tax increment reinvestment zone number 9 was created back in 2017, and this was for the construction of the Eastside Sports Complex Phase 2. So this was to add the additional sports fields. So there was about $14.5 million that was committed to that project. The city issued a CO, and that CO is being paid back by the TERS revenue and by the PID that was created. So currently there's about $11.7 million in remaining obligation on that project. We cannot terminate that zone until we have that obligation for the construction paid off. And so what the recommendation is going to be is that we take our debt service reserves that we currently have in place. Right now we're projecting to finish this fiscal year with about $16.5 million. We still do collect the PID revenue as well that we could use to help pay down a portion of that, but we would recommend using some of those debt service reserves to pay off the remaining obligation for TERS number 9. And so what that does is that would free up, it does two things really. One, it would free up almost $5 million currently in the fund that is currently restricted for the debt service for TERS 9. So we'd free up that $4.8 million, which would become unrestricted, so we can use that for other priorities. Plus, additionally, for the FY26 and beyond, what it does is it frees up that money that was previously restricted to that zone. So it'd be approximately another $2 million that would come to the general fund going forward instead of being restricted into the TERS 9 fund. And then we would recommend keeping the PID in place to help with the ongoing maintenance of the facility into the future years. And so again, this is really a strategy that we've been thinking about for a while, something that we wanted to do last year. Unfortunately, the obligation was a little bit too large. We weren't able to do it. But I believe we're at a point in time where now we can bring something like this back to council for consideration and for approval as we begin to develop out the FY 2026 budget. And again, trying to identify some additional revenue to help, again, minimize the impact on the property tax rate next year. So we had the slide in the SIB loan presentation, but I included this slide here as well. And so this is incorporating, go back real quickly just to this table to show you. It's taking the numbers from slide 24. So the annual planned issuances. And so I work with Maria Urbina. She puts this into a debt model. We forecast to project out what we think property valuations are going to be into the future. And then obviously use that to help look at the impact on the future debt service tax rate going forward. And so you can see that factoring in that new money issuance for the public safety and community progress bonds, about $100 million next year with the SIB loans. You can see the FY 2026 projected debt service rate actually decreases slightly. Some of that's due primarily to the increase we're projected in property valuations. But then really the intent is how do we maintain and minimize that debt rate over time so that we don't have large spikes, again, on the debt service portion of the tax rate. And so you can see that for FY 26 and 27 remains relatively flat. FY 2028, we do have a slight increase. FY 29, a slight increase. And then it really starts to taper off once you get beyond that. I will say with this model, though, one of the things that it does not incorporate is it does not incorporate future refundings. So anything beyond FY 2026, opportunities that we have to refinance or refund those bonds, just because the uncertainty, we don't know, we don't want to project or be overly optimistic what that will look like. So that is not accounted for in this. So that would help bring down this overall impact as well going forward. But again, if everything based on the assumptions that I showed you, this is what our future debt service rate will look like. If you recall, when I started the presentation, I mentioned that the debt management policy actually has a 40-cent cap on the debt service rate. And you can see with this slide here that we're barely projected to hit just over 25 cents, so staying well below that maximum rate that's allowed per the debt management policy. So in summary, as Maria mentioned and I mentioned, we'll just continue to monitor the market. We'll continue working on the ordinance that we'll bring forth before City Council to do that refunding. We do include in there, one of the parameters is that we provide up to 12 months to actually move forward with the transaction. What that does, it gives us time, depending upon how the market's doing. If we need to wait a month or two before we do that transaction, provides a little bit of flexibility. We'll also start preparing the ordinance for the termination of TERS number 9 and what that'll look like as far as actually bringing back that unrestricted or that previously restricted revenue into the general fund. And then, as Joaquin mentioned, we'll continue working on the SIB loan application, and we'll have that on the April 29th council agenda. So I know that was a lot. We really tried to condense and provide really good information that was useful, really just to provide some context as to some of the key things we're working on, not only to help us with the FY 2026 budget and the debt rate, but again, as we look to sort of the next several years and really what we're doing to try to minimize the impact on the property tax rate going forward.
Thank you. A lot of information to digest. I have a question or comments from Representative Nino.
Thank you, Mr. Cortines, for this presentation. The TERS number 9 is in District 5, so quick question. You mentioned that the PID would still cover the maintenance for the Eastside Sports Complex, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Do we know what the cost of the maintenance is annually, or what the PID currently, what the revenue is for the current PID?
We've actually not had any maintenance on the project. I believe that the project's still about to be finished, and so the PID brings in about $250,000 a year, and so I believe that there'll be more than enough through the PID annual revenue to be able to fund the maintenance for that project.
Okay, perfect. No further questions. I just wanted to ensure that I had that information because I know that it's a huge sports complex and we're getting ready to do open phase 2.
Yes, sir.
And I know the community is really excited for it. I want to ensure that we do have that funding to continue the maintenance on it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Representative Chavez.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Robert, for your presentation. Just out of curiosity, you said you wanted to do this last year, but you couldn't because of the amount. Can you tell me the difference between last year and this year and how that changed?
So last year we did the defeasance for to help in FY 2027 and 28, and we weren't able to do it all at once, and so we needed to wait until we built up our debt service reserves. Fortunately, we've been able to generate investment interest this year in our debt service fund because of the cash we have on hand. And so we've been able to build up that debt service reserves to the point where now we're able to do something like this. Just couldn't do it all at once. We have to take bits and pieces when we have the opportunity.
Robert, can you speak to how the debt service reserve is funded? You talked about interest.
So so you saw the debt service rate that we have. We get property tax collections. As we collect property taxes, that's split according to the property tax rate. So a portion goes to the general fund, portion goes into the debt service fund segregation. The cash that's in those funds, if we generate investment interest off of those particular funds, it stays within that fund. For example, debt service, it can only be used for debt service. We can't take those funds and use them for general fund operations. And so we've been able to accumulate a balance because of the investment strategies that we've had in the debt service fund and just through property tax collections over the last several years. So there is a requirement in that debt management policy that we maintain a certain amount. It's about $3.5 million. And so we'll still be able to maintain that minimum balance, but then at the same time be able to do something, like I mentioned, with the TERS 9.
And thank you, Robert. And your estimations on everything you've given today is just on current conditions, right? Not knowing what we could do or what we wouldn't need to do in the future or what's going to happen.
Exactly. I didn't give you all the full disclaimer that I did when I did the 5-year forecast, but for example, that debt service tax rate model, it has property valuations built in, it has interest rate assumptions built in, the issuance amount built in. So those things will change, really just provide you all some context as to what we're facing. I don't anticipate it being too far off, but
What is
never
the
know
what
what's
is the
gonna
biggest
happen
risk
next year.
factor right now?
excuse me?
What is the biggest risk factor right now?
Just interest rates.
Just interest
and
rates.
we're hoping that it comes down, but this past week has been very volatile with interest rates.
Okay, thank you, Robert.
So I had a few thoughts. I was looking at slide 7, the breakdown of outstanding debt. That is also up to date in terms of the MPC stuff, right? That doesn't include.
This is as of August 31st, 2024. So I did this as of the
Okay.
close of the last fiscal year.
Okay. So then this will change slightly because of that at some point?
Yes. It will.
Okay. Okay, perfect. And then on the 136 million or so that we've saved on debt management, I know it was a big deal last year when we paid off the Plaza Theater, and that was good. So now I'm thinking more about this coming to the general fund. How are we planning these things out, right? We're saying kind of like, okay, well, now we have more money in the general fund. We're getting rid of this charge. Hopefully we're going to have more money in the general fund. So what do we have in place to kind of plan on using that money for other things? Is it just saying, okay, we have more money and then we'll figure it out during a budget workshop?
Well, if you'll recall, when we did the 5-year forecast for the FY 2026 budget, again, this was before we even started really developing what those numbers are going to look like. But based on that 5-year forecast, FY 2026, we had a $10 million estimated deficit. And so trying to work out, and it was the balancing, right? How are we going to generate new revenue to cover those costs, and how are we going to look at managing or decreasing some of the other costs in the budget? And so it's really just to help sort of close that gap of what we're going to need to be able to fund existing services based on the pay increases that we've done, the pay increases we have planned for next year, the increases from the collective bargaining, just annual operating increases that we're going to have next year. So this additional revenue is really to serve that purpose, to help identify and close that gap that we have currently for next year.
Okay. The other thing on the last slide, I know that this item's not posted for action. These are kind of next steps that you're going to be doing in the next few council meetings. But I'm wondering, we've been talking a lot about SIB loans today. Are we pursuing anything with NatBank that we could start having those conversations as well?
So I know there's been some discussions on other areas, but not with the MPO match. And so one of the reasons why we looked at the SIB loans, twofold. So one, it's a sustainable source. 2, the interest rates are very, very low, so very favorable. 3, you can draw it down in multiple tranches, so you don't have to issue it all at once. You can issue as you need it. So a lot of benefits to doing the SIB, but as far as that question, we've had some discussions in other areas, but not with the transportation project. And also the SIB loans are intended to serve as match for MPO-related projects.
Okay, I've had some conversations with staff about NatBank, but I think we can really look at that in a way for our bridges. We could have that discussion. I think that would be a big game changer. So I just wanted to throw that out there as we continue to have these conversations.
Right. Yeah. And as I mentioned, we've had some discussions on some other projects, but not related to the MPO ones.
Right. The other thing, I had a few questions on the. Mr. Urbina, this is probably more for you. I know we're gonna in this volatile environment, and the stock market is up and down on a daily basis, and we'll see what happens in the next 90 days, right? But as we're kind of having those conversations, have we had bond proceeds invested to earn interest since we're in a high interest rate environment?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so we reported that out in the fourth quarter. Actually, we're doing the second quarter presentation next week, and so we can show you what that looks like just for the general fund. We're at about 2.8 million so far for this fiscal year. But absolutely, our bond proceeds are the cash money that we have on hand related to bonds. It's invested just like all of our funds are. Again, but it's segregated. It's restricted for those particular bonds, so it can't be used for general fund operations or for any other purpose. It's got to be for those bond-related purposes.
Okay, and then I know we had an example on refunding, right? Or is that the only one we're looking at this point, or are there other opportunities that we could look at?
So the three that we identified, so there's the current refunding and the tender offer. Those are the three that are available right now. It's a minimal amount, but it is, again, a potential opportunity to generate a little bit of savings. Really, next year is when we have a large opportunity. So in 2016, there was about $300 million worth of bonds between the GOs and COs that was issued. So you heard us mention that 10-year call date. And so at FY 2026, a pretty large opportunity. Again, but it's all dependent upon the market conditions and if those interest rates are going to be favorable to go out and actually do the refinancing to actually generate some savings. We believe they will, but again, it's just going to be a wait and see until next year.
Yeah.
If I may add, I'll just let you know that every single year, so obviously we look at airport debt, the Downtown Development Corp, and the GEO credit, and right now, the presentation that we gave you today, that's the only refunding opportunity for this year.
For this year, okay. And then any other innovative ideas that you've been kind of looking at for us to save money? You know, capital expenditures are big. And maybe also, how can we decrease the debt burden to increase capacity? Because that's something that is high on my mind.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we do when we actually have conversations with staff, I think the presentation that was presented by Robert today, you look at the debt service, you know, for the past 3-4 years, it's gone down from like 29 cents to about 23 cents. I understand, obviously, there hasn't been that much bond issuance, but when we actually look at refundings, we structure the savings accordingly to make sure that we lower that tax rate that you're talking about. And so for the past 5 years, I could just tell you that we've helped the city not only issue $700 million of debt, however, we've saved over $40 million in that same time frame, and the debt has come down from 29 cents to roughly about 23. So yeah, that's very top of mind. And every single time, every year, we meet, we look, and we structure, and we try to find every avenue for you.
Okay. I appreciate that. And this might be getting a little too far ahead, but when do you see us going out for another bond?
So we're planning, as I mentioned in the presentation, we're planning to do about $100 million of new issuance. As I mentioned also, that parameter will give us up to 12 months when we bring it to City Council for approval of the actual ordinance. We haven't talked about the actual timing yet. We would like to probably do the refunding sooner than later, just so that we know what that savings is going to be as we're developing the FY26 budget. But it's just going to be a wait and see right now until we see how the market kind of calms down a little bit right now.
Okay.
And we're not in desperate need of actually going out and doing a new money issuance. So right now, the capital projects are fine. We've got enough bond proceeds on hand to keep those projects going. So we're not in a hurry to go out and do that issuance, but we will probably do something during the early stages or middle stages of next fiscal year.
Okay. Any other discussion on this? Okay. Thank you so much. There's no action on this item. We'll move over to item number 4, discussion on types of engagements. Mr. Calderon.
Good afternoon again. Edmundo Calderon, Chief Internal Auditor for the City of El Paso. At the last FOAC meeting, I was requested to do a presentation for the FOAC on the types of engagements we do in our office. So let me call it up. It's a short, really short presentation. Where is it? That one right there. Thank you, IT. Okay. So internal audit department, types of engagements that we have. We basically have 3 types of engagements that we conduct in the department. Okay. The first one we conduct are audits, the famous A. Okay, when you see it on the audit report. They're called assurance engagements. And what it does, services which internal auditors perform objective assessments to provide assurance. Okay. Example of assurance services include compliance, financial, operations/performance, and technology audits. These are full-blown audits that everybody has grown to know and love. Internal auditors may provide limited or reasonable assurance depending on the nature, timing, and extent of procedures reviewed. Remember, a lot of times when we do audits, we do sampling, and that's why we, as auditors, we can only provide you reasonable assurance, not absolute assurance that we discovered everything or identified everything. When we do these types of engagements, our budgeted hours are approximately 500 hours plus when we schedule. So when I'm looking at the annual audit plan that this committee approves, I'll schedule those for 500, and más o menos they'll go a little bit over, sometimes a little bit under, depending on how efficient that the auditors were doing the work and how quickly and accurately the data was provided, it was used. So it just depends on many factors on that one, okay? The next type of engagement we have, it's also an assurance engagement, and these are the follow-up audits. This committee, this FOAC yet has not seen a follow-up audit. You're going to see some because we've already completed some. So they'll also have an A number. And we're required to do these follow-ups based on two professional standards that we follow. One, the global internal audit standards require that the Chief Internal Audit Executive establish a follow-up process to monitor and ensure that management actions have been effectively implemented or that senior management has accepted the risk of not taking action. So we do them based on that one. The other standards, which are the federal ones, the generally accepted government auditing standards, state that auditors should evaluate whether the audited entity has taken appropriate corrective action to address findings and recommendations from previous engagements. These types of engagements, these follow-ups when we do, pretty quick. We get them done fairly fast. They usually take us about 250 hours from beginning to end. Okay. The last type of engagement we have, they're called advisory engagements, and those are the projects. Those are the ones you see which have a P number in the audit report cover. And these are services where internal auditors provide advice to organization stakeholders without providing assurances. Okay, we're just advising. We're providing information. Okay, the nature and scope of advisory services are subject to agreements with relative stakeholders. So we usually, when we agree to do these, we'll agree on the objectives with the client up front at the beginning, so the client knows what we're going to be doing on this type of project. Examples include advising on the design and implementation of new policies, new processes, systems, or products. We don't have any products with the City of El Paso. We don't produce anything, but this is out of our definition book. We provide training, evaluations, and discussion on internal controls. Recently, this committee has received some reports from me where we've done some internal control evaluation at city departments. You know, we did the health department and Sun Metro. So we provide those. We go out and evaluate their systems and then provide them with, that's why they're called observations, what we see, and then we provide them recommendations on how they can get better in their processes. And then we also can complete risk assessments as needed. And also these projects, these advisory engagements usually take us about 250 hours. So they're fairly quick, a lot quicker than an audit. If it's a full-blown audit, we're talking 500 hours plus. So it's double the time it takes. So that when you see them on the audit plan or on my updates, you'll see why, you'll see the hours because we actually give you the hours that we used on them. So we try to lock it in, but sometimes they do go over, okay? With that, is there any questions on these types of engagements?
Representative Chavez?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Calderon. So how do you decide what's an audit and what's a project?
We decide that when we're establishing the objectives of the engagement. What are we trying to accomplish? What are we trying to identify? A lot of that I get from the input when we start doing the annual audit plan. when I'm doing the risk assessment, which we're going to go over one in a minute, the next presentation. So based on information, I look at it, I evaluate it. I look at it, I say, okay, this project, this is heavy duty. We're really going to have to get into it because of the objectives that I'm getting from either the council or management. I think this is an audit. We're going to have to invest some time on this, so that's going to be a big one.
And is risk
Yes.
involved in any of this
Oh,
decision making?
Yes, ma'am. Risk involves everything I do.
Okay.
If you ever look at like our definition of what auditors do, we do risk-based auditing. Everything we do is based on risk.
And is this decision based on a team effort or just your decision?
No, it's based on my entire staff.
Okay.
If you ever get to witness it, it's interesting because you get 5-6 people at a table and you'll get 5-6 different sets of ideas, and you'll see different sets of risk, which is amazing. Because even when I talk to management or I go to the departments to do interviews to identify risk, even at a department, you go from a director, he has his set of risk. He sees his world and how risky it is. But then as you go down the organization, and let's say you look at a manager or a supervisor, they have a whole different world of risk.
Yeah. But that's why I'm wondering if there's, a set process in place that you document, just to
Yes.
make sure that we're being equitable in terms of which projects, or I'm sorry, which things come before you and are assigned as either a project or an audit.
Yes, ma'am. All
Okay.
those risks are
So
documented.
that's well documented.
Yes, they're well documented. I keep those records and they're readily available.
Okay.
And I know when we go through our peer review every 3 years, they actually look at those. And I know recently Weaver actually, the outfit that was just hired by City Council to review my office, they looked at them and it's
Okay.
all well documented.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, 250 or 500 hours, what is that equivalent in terms of time?
Okay,
Like in
that's a
days
very
or
good
months
question.
or whatever?
Now, don't think that when we start an audit, 500 hours, it's 500 straight hours. Okay, my auditors juggle anywhere from 2 to 3, sometimes 4 different engagements. Okay, so they could be working on several things. I wish I could give them one at a time, but the real world doesn't allow that. It's because sometimes you're waiting, you have a client and you're waiting for documentation from them or information. Well, you're just waiting. So while they're waiting, they go work on their other projects. So what we do, we move them along.
But
all
on
of them.
average, regular audit for 500 hours, what is that
500
equivalent to?
hours, that's another good question. I was going to get there. You can actually think 90 days.
Okay.
90 days, because remember, we're juggling several
Yes.
audits. So my goal when we do an audit, a full-blown audit, is to get it completed from start to finish within 90 days.
Okay.
And sometimes we're pretty good at it, and sometimes it takes us a little bit longer because of the complexity of the area we're looking at. The project side, 250 hours, we usually try to get those out 45 days, 60 days, somewhere in there.
Okay.
We'll try to
And
get-
remind me how many you do a year, Mr. Calderon, again?
How many?
Audits.
Audits and projects combined?
Yes.
30,
30 combined between the both of them.
on the average.
On the
And we-
average, yes,
on the
of
average.
course.
And we have statistical information to show you how many we've done every year since
Okay.
the beginning of time, or my time.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good questions.
So I had a few questions myself. Can you walk me through the follow-up audit process, right? So I'm thinking about, let's say, in February, we discussed an audit on planning and inspection with permits. So that audit is going to have a follow-up audit in the next fiscal year.
Correct.
So when does that audit start?
What I do, if you remember, when you look at the original audit, you will have our finding, then you have our recommendation, and then you have the management's responses. In those responses, they give us their agreement or disagreement sometimes on the recommendation. If they agree, which usually they do, then they give us a responsible party. That's usually somebody on their staff that will be handling this thing head on. and then they give me an implementation date. That date is very important because I don't want to go in before those things expire. So we monitor them. We have a database in our office, and we monitor those implementation dates. So once they're expired, I will contact the department head, and I will ask them, okay, they're expired. How's the process coming? Are you ready, or do you need a little bit more time? Because I want to be fair with them. And then they'll tell me, yeah, can I, yeah, we're ready. Or can I have another 30 days? They're all different. And that's when it's ready to go. When the green light is on, we'll go. And then we engage it, and we'll start that follow-up audit process to begin. And it's very formal. It's a very formal process.
Okay. I feel that this is something that I'm really hoping we can make more efficient. And it's something that I've talked to Weaver about. Because I think doing another audit on it is not the best approach that we can take. And I would like it to be a little bit more efficient, right? So, for example, the planning and inspection on the permits, that is set for September of this year. That's what management response
Okay,
said, right?
I can't recall, but
Yeah,
I'll take your word for it.
So that one's set for September this year, and then let's say they say, okay, we're good, and then now we're going to start another audit on them. I feel that there could be a better way of doing it through a corrective action plan as that communication is happening with you. And then, for example, as a FOAC member, I want to have an understanding of what the calendar looks like. So for that one, they said it's in September. And in September, I would like to know they actually need another 30 days, 60 days. So this is getting moved over to November now, or October, right? And so that gives me an understanding of what's happening. But I also want to know why they need more time. And if we had a corrective action plan, I think that we could kind of see of the 10 things that we asked them to do, they've done 5. And then the other 5, we're waiting because something happened for this certain scenario. We don't have all the information, but I want to have an understanding of how this is being implemented, because I feel like they get forgotten. And then another audit, by the time we get it, it's months later that we're getting that. And we could have more of a real-time conversation with it if we made it more efficient.
The common best practice in the profession, Rep. Acevedo, is to conduct a follow-up. It's to do it. I know what you're talking about, a corrective action plan. That is built into our process. Let's say we do the follow-up, okay? And during the follow-up, we find that there's still issues. There's still some little problem going on. We can schedule a second follow-up to come back and do it. We have done it in the past to come back a second time to look at it. But we have to be very careful on how much we get in with the department. And I'm trying to pick my words very carefully here, because I have to maintain my independence. That is an absolute requirement. I cannot compromise my independence, okay? If we go in and start, I'm trying to find the word, but I'll just use the word, I'm micromanaging the department. That is out of my realm. I am overstepping my boundary. And I would think it would also be overstepping the FOACs. I think if we did the first follow-up and there were still issues, I think that we should be referred to the city manager, and then that would be addressed that way. Not by us, the audit department, the FOAC, continue going into the department.
And I don't see this as a micromanaging aspect at all. I'm actually further from that. I want to have the accountability and knowledge of what is happening there, and having to wait and use hours in an audit plan for a second audit for the same thing the next year, rather than having something that is a lot more efficient and we're checking up on it, and then you can come to the FOIC and say, this is why we're still waiting on them. It just doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of streamlining it. And I know that that is something that is in your standards, but this is something that could also be part of your standards where you're able to do the cap and really focus on the cap. And we could bring the staff, Miss Mack can bring her staff and answer those questions so we could have real-time updates rather than just treating this as another audit. So we could work on that a little bit more, but it is one of my biggest priorities that I've talked to Weaver about, and I'm hoping that we could have a little bit more clarity in the next few weeks when Weaver is finished.
Well, hopefully we can have that discussion, but I'm gonna have to be very, very solid on my stance of maintaining independence, because
I don't think
cannot
it
go in and
compromises
manage
your
the
independence.
departments.
It does not compromise your independence. The number one thing that an auditor needs to have is independence and credibility. And I don't see that as something that would harm any of that.
Now, what we do create, I'm here thinking, I'm listening to you, okay, so don't think I'm not listening.
No,
We do a bunch of analysis before we go in to do these audits. We do another risk assessment. We do an audit program. We do a lot of planning before. We just don't just take the deep dive. We conduct a bunch of analysis. So I think what you're asking for is in there, in that process for us. So I think in talking about this, we can come up with something that will satisfy what you're looking for, and I just think we can work on it. I think we're there. We just got to fine-tune little things to get you the information I think you're looking for.
Yeah, and overall, it's about systems and processes that are going
I
to
think we're there.
improve. And also, I think about an audit plan, and I want to be very strategic on how we use that audit plan every year. Because as you said, you do about 30 engagements a year. And if some of those engagements are kind of repetitive from the other year, we're leaving some stuff out, right? So let's have more conversations about this.
Yeah, we definitely need to sit down and talk, because I need to give you some more, I don't want to say education, but more information. There you go.
Okay.
More information, how it works and how it's done. We're doing what you want. It's just, I just got to get it to you. So that's easy.
Okay.
We can get that
Thank
done.
you. Any other discussion from the FOIA? Okay, so this item does not have any action. Let's move to the final item of the agenda, discussion and action on the FY 2024-2025 annual audit plan replacement audits.
Okay. As you know, we've deleted some audits from the annual plan because of changes in conditions that we've identified. So we had deleted earlier the audit over at the zoo, but then now it's back on. So we're back on. So when we first started, we had deleted 3 projects, or 3 engagements, and which was a total of 1,000 hours. Okay, but now we have brought back the zoo, so there went 500 hours there. So that leaves me 500 hours left. So we have a little bit of capacity, not a lot, but a little bit. Okay, so everybody, I received a bunch of information regarding ideas for and I called them the replacement audits because I couldn't think of anything else to call them. So I got a bunch of information, and Rep. Acevedo asked me to conduct a risk assessment on it, so I did. Okay, and I chose a model. If you ever have done a risk assessment, there's like 40, 50, 60 different models to do a risk assessment. Okay, so I'm going to pick something simple that's easily understood, and that way it would be a great starting point for a discussion, because I'm going to be asking the committee, okay, which audit? Which audit do you want? And then you're going to feel or understand my world, because you're there. We have so many. I received 12 requests, 12 ideas, and we only have room for 1. So which one? Question mark, right? So here we go. Let me show you what I did. The risk model, I put two elements in it, and I go the risk probability and the risk impact. Okay, so if you look at if you ever go back and look at the regular risk assessment we do for the annual audit plan, that one has 9 elements. That's a little bit way more detailed than this one. So then what we do, we rate them high, medium, and low. So, and then so to help a little better, I had my staff color code them. So all the highs are colored in red. All the mediums are coded in yellow, and all the lows are in green. Okay. So here I'm going to just start at the top, and these were the 12 according to the ranking I gave them. So I gave you the areas that was suggested, okay, and the concerns, the best I can put in there with a space allowed. And then I put the source, so everybody can see who offered the information. And then I put the risk probability. That's the risk that's the probability that the risk could happen. And I know you're going to ask me, what risk? I have that, okay? I have that on a separate document, okay? And then the impact of the risk. What impact will it have on the organization, in this case, our city, what it would have, okay? So here they go. They're not the highest, okay? So don't get me wrong. It's just the group that scored the highest. So here we got I like to call them the high highs, the reds, solid reds. And I have 4 that came out high. One was the airport construction change orders audit. That one came from Rep. Acevedo, and it actually was one of mine too. We raised it for risk probability. I had it high, and for risk impact high. Okay, after that, I listed code compliance, requirements and enforcement practices. That's the idea we got. That came from Rep. Maldonado Rocha. That also scored double high. Accounts payable audit, compliance at various departments, and that's on how our departments pay the bills. That was my idea. So I gave that a double high. Number 4 is a little bit of a different type of engagement. It's community development, minor home repairs. I received that from Representative Chavez and City Manager Mack. We received that request. I just want to let you know, I already have an audit scheduled in that area. And we're actually have scheduled an audit on the Home Solution Grant, which involves minor home repairs. So that's already scheduled. We're kind of starting the very tip of that one, but we're already started looking at that one. Okay, I've already talked to Araceli Guerra on it, and we're kind of like trying to establish a good set of objectives on this one. Okay, so these are the highs. These are all the 4 major ones. Then we go to the next area. These are the next one. Number 5 is going to be my high medium, and that's on purchasing of vendor performance audits. Okay, and that came also from Rep. Maldonado Rocha. The reason it didn't score double red, and it was because we've done audits on these before. Okay, if you go back to the previous, if I can get back to the previous slide, like code compliance on the requirements and enforcement practices, we've never done an audit there. We've never done anything with code compliance. That's why it raised it up on the risk assessment. Now, you come over here and you look at purchasing vendor performance audits. We've done quite a few of those. The most recent one we reviewed there was a bid on Ford parts for our vehicles that are Fords, and we were buying parts, and there was a bit of a controversy with it's always the one that complains is the vendor that didn't get the contract. The one that gets it always rarely never complains. But that's what happened there, so we looked at that. The next 2 we had was regarding fire department overtime and police department overtime. Now, we've done engagements there before in both areas. I personally like these 2, and I plan to use them in next year's risk assessment when I do the big risk assessment for next year's audits. And those colors are going to change a little bit. I have a feeling when we do that, when I look at overall the risk assessment for the entire, what they call the universe, okay? Number 8 is overtime also. Oh no, body worn cameras. Okay, I'm sorry. That also came from Ed Chavez and City Manager Mack. I do have an engagement right now going on at this very moment over body-worn cameras. We're working over at the police department. We're doing a cybersecurity audit, and in that audit, we've actually included the body-worn camera software and the digitization of those videos and how they are safeguarded and all of the above. And we're about maybe 15% into that one. We have an outside cybersecurity contractor that I have a contract with, and they're assisting us in looking at the security of the program. So we have something going on that one right now. Okay. Then the last four we received, planning inspections. We received that again from Representative Maldonado Rocha. That actually meant a medium low. Why? Because we just completed an audit there. We have a follow-up going to happen. Rep. Acevedo just mentioned that we're going to be back there, probably after September sometime. We don't know when, but we'll be there after September. Then after that, we have human resources, hiring practices. Also, Rep. Maldonado Rocha also came out medium low. We've done a lot of work on the hiring practices. Recently, we did complete an audit there. And we completed an audit. It was actually called Hiring Practices Review, and it was dated September 2nd, 2021. So not recent, but not very old, but we've done something like that. Why did I lose my, there you go, bring it back. And then the two that scored very low, one was on the Senior Citizen Advisory Board audit, their fundraising, the internal controls over there, also from Representative Maldonado Rocha. We ranked that one as low, and the reason why, because I've actually looked at those many years ago. We looked at it, we had a small little problem over there, and they're small amounts. These are the senior groups that raise funds for their Valentine's Day dance, Father's Day dance, Mother's Day dance. They do a lot of dancing over there, okay? And they raise funds in the mornings. They usually have fundraisers. They sell café and pan dulce deal. They sell you a cup of coffee and a piece of sweet bread, and the seniors sit there and talk senior stuff. So it's low when I compare it to the other areas. And then somebody saying? And then the last one we had was home on the Housing Authority, and that also came from Maldonado Rocha. I understand looking at compliance with state and federal law, but I have no jurisdiction. They're governed by a separate board, and unless they would request assistance from us, I can't. I don't think I can go in there. It's like with other quasi-governments.
Thank you for putting this risk assessment together. I think this is really important to look at when we're trying to say, well, let's audit this or let's audit that. I think this really provides a nice example of what you do to make sure we move an audit forward or we don't. And I think this also gives us a nice little preview as a FOAC. In the coming months, you're going to be coming to us to start coming up with next year's audit plan. And so I know that we're probably only going to pick one today because of the 500 hours. But we could keep these in mind as we're having the conversations for next year. I did appreciate you saying, well, I'm already doing this audit, or I'm kind of covering it here, or whatever this is. So I think this is really helpful for us, and it's a good conversation starter for the next audit plan. So now I think the difficult part that we have to have considered today is where do we go? And it seems like we have on slide 2 3 audits that are really high risk and maybe just where we focus for now, and then the rest we could look at conversations later. So Rep. Chavez, I'll let you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Calderon,
Yes, ma'am.
from those first 3 on slide 2, are they listed in any particular order?
Not really, because you go mostly by the ratings, which they're all identical. All 4 of them are. And then, of course, we color code them to make it easier to understand. So
But there's no
they all
scoring
have
on
their
this.
value, and they all have their risk, and they all have their differences. I mean, if we would do all 4 audits I'm looking at, me as your auditor, I have to design 4 different audit programs for these.
No, I understand. We're just trying to choose one today. So I'm just
know.
wondering if there's a scoring process between those first three.
No, ma'am.
Okay. And then my second question is, I think you said number 2, you've never done an audit on code
No,
compliance?
we've never done an audit
And
over
what
code
about 1 and
compliance.
3?
I'm sorry?
1 and 3? Have you
1
ever
and 3,
done?
yes, ma'am.
Have you ever done
No,
audits on those?
I've done work at the airport, not under change orders, not under
Okay.
capital improvement projects, but I have done a ton of work at the airport.
Okay, and what about number 3? Because you suggested number 3,
Yes,
so
uh,
I'm wondering why.
Number 3, we've done account payable audits throughout the city, throughout the years. And we do that because we find all sorts of areas that need to be worked on. And what we have in the city, and Margarita, if she's here, she'll probably back me up on it. We have a decentralized accounts payable system. What I mean by a decentralized account payable system, we don't have a centralized payables in Margarita's area. That Margarita pays all the bills for every department throughout the city. Now, by decentralized, I mean the departments control the payments of their bills, and they pay it. Now, Margarita has a bunch of bills she pays that might run citywide, but the vast majority of our expenditures are in this decentralized system that are managed by the individual departments. And that, in my opinion, is very, very risky.
Okay. But there is no way to differentiate between 1, 2, and 3 so that you could make this decision easy for us? No. Okay, so it's just going to
No.
be, okay.
Well,
I just wanted to be sure.
I can't. I wish now, you know what we go through, because we do this in our office when I'm trying to develop an audit plan to present to the audit committee. And we have capacity maybe for 10 audits, just an example. And we have a short list of 13. Which 3 do we let go? That's tough. That's the hardest part of my job.
Well, I think we should consider, different factors, and maybe we could all speak to that. But, I mean, one of the factors is it monetary, right?
Yes.
Are there going to be any financial findings or implications from one of these audits?
Now, yes. I have some
go ahead.
additional information I can give you based on my analysis.
Yeah, that would
might
be
help
great.
you.
And,
Okay,
yes, so-
let me do that real
okay.
quick, because it's real short.
Okay,
Airport, construction change orders. We've had recent violations of city and federal policies regarding change orders, right? And then we're aware of 2 instances where work being completed without unapproved change orders. I've picked that up. We have the use of federal funds, because those projects are funded with federal dollars. And we still have another presentation coming according to the notes I have. Now, with code compliance, we have the code compliance requirements. We have enforcement practices by code compliance, and they've never been audited. I've never looked
yes,
at it.
and that one specifically is probably not going to be financially based, but
It's more program operational.
sure. And equally important, for those reasons you just mentioned.
And accounts payable, I think I've spoken
accounts
on that
payable.
one. That's financial, that one's 100%.
So I would like to ask the city manager if she wanted to weigh in on just these first 3, since I guess those are the ones that I'm looking at right now.
Sure, I just want to clarify for the record that there was no federal violation of policy at the airport regarding the change orders. It was our city policy. On code compliance, we've just stood up that department April 1st, and they're just getting together in terms of being an entire department. They're pulling together 8 to 9 different functional units that used to live in 8 to 9 other departments. And so in terms of giving them an opportunity to really build their infrastructure, and their SOPs, I would respectfully request that they have at least a year to be able to do that. Regarding accounts payable, I can defer to Margarita on some of those. I know we have some active right now. I believe that you're at the airport right now on accounts payable and have others. So.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Margarita Marin, Deputy CFO Controller. Just to give you a little background context on the accounts payable, to Mundo's point, yes, it is a decentralized system, and while we don't control how departments make the payment, how soon they make them. We do have oversight at the end of the process. So when when the departments submit for payments, we do come in place and we review. We have like a checklist, and we go ahead and review like authorization, proper documentation, funding sources selected by the department. But if we find any discrepancy, we kick it back to the department and we question things. And we do check 100% of those payments. So we do have a process in place, but again, as far as complying with the Prompt Payment Act, paying within the 30 days, those things are managed at the department. It depends on their processes.
Thank you, Margarita.
You're welcome.
So Chairman, I don't know. I mean, I was just looking at the first three, but I'm not suggesting that we should not look at any others. Those were just my questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Representative Nino.
Mundo, quick question for you. I know that in the audit plan, different audits require different hours allocated, right? Can you kind of share with us in this, sorry that my voice is kind of something happening with it. Can you share with us, all of these audits require 500 hours, or is there any of them that could possibly have less hours required in order to complete?
In my opinion, I believe all 4 of them will be a 500-hour project based on the research that I've done.
Thank you. Representative Maldonado Rocha.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate it. And thank you, Mr. Calderon, for the presentation on this. I understand that there is an issue with the airport. I get that they're having an opportunity to, I guess, get into compliance, for lack of a better term. I know that code compliance is may not be monetary. However, it can be monetary when it comes to the fines and everything that's provided. And that's really the one that's more publicly, that affects the actual, I mean, they all affect the taxpayer, but this does affect the residential customer and to a certain extent as well, the commercial customers. And I feel, and this is my opportunity to say it, it's an opportunity since there's a reorganization of code compliance right now that's happening. They're revamping or I should say ramping up new employees as well. I feel it's a perfect opportunity to be able to make sure that those new practices in place are adequate, or is there an opportunity to say, let's come back and do it next year after they've ramped up?
May I ask for clarification on what area of code compliance you're referring to?
Well, there's several items to code compliance where residential customers, none from the business community have reached out, but residential in particular feel that there's more subjectivity that's included to it versus actual policy and process. In other words, weeds, right? There's not necessarily like we're going to go out the first time and we're going to give them a warning, and then there's another warning, and then on the third time they'll cite, and then on the fourth time they'll fine. So it feels, at least to the residential customers that I've spoken to, that there's more subjectivity that's applied versus actual process in place. And that may be incorrect, right? But that is their belief right now.
So you're really looking at nuisance. I asked that because code compliance for us includes parking enforcement, animal services, building inspections, nuisance teams. So if you want to beautification. So if there's some narrowing, I think maybe that gives us a better sense of what you would like him to be able to look at.
Yeah.
And if it's really about the fines, then I think that really becomes about the relationship with the courts as well, which was a part of the conversation that I think the representative brought forward, the chair brought forward a couple of months ago about the relationship with Muni Court and how those fines and things are being applied equally.
And that may be a definite an opportunity at that point, whether to separate it out. I don't know what the purview you risk this at, Mr. Calderon, versus like how did you come up with the high impact in, without using those parameters that City Manager Mack
My
just
scores
mentioned?
were based on the interviews. As you know, I went and I spoke to every one of you. And this is the information that was provided to me. So I took all that information and developed these scores. It's very subjective. I'm not going to say it isn't. It's a very subjective analysis. The information is given to me, and my charge was to develop the risk assessment. And
Right.
is it 100% correct? I can't tell you, but I can tell you that look at some of the suggestions I received. Audits have already been scheduled there. So I made me feel really good. I said, all right, my committee's on this. They give me stuff that's already been identified, so they're getting it. They got it, and you hit already some that we already had scheduled. So that was a feel good moment for me, because I felt really good about that. It's great information. So it's all based on information that was given to me.
So I think just trying to
That's it. Thank you.
narrow this down a little bit more. I think it is good to focus on the first three. I am wondering if what Ms. Max said about narrowing the scope a little bit more to nuisance stuff and code enforcement would be helpful, or if you want it more done in that sense, based on what you're hearing in the community.
Yeah, the community has a lot of issues, at least in my district. What I've been hearing is a lot of issues with pools, the rentals, the noise ordinance piece, the weeds piece. There's also, obviously I get some from animal services, but I know there's been an audit on animal services already, so I don't believe that should be part of the scope of this particular effort. But there may be other parameters within code compliance overall that could be included in that, being the nuisance, right? Nuisances for sure. I think that's a bigger part of it, right?
Is there any thoughts on going into the compliance with accounts payable from the committee on this? I'm going to take that as a no. And so, is there any thoughts on airport construction change orders?
Not necessarily. I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Not necessarily thoughts, but I do want to take into account Ms. Mack's statement, saying that I believe that that's an opportunity for possibly a follow-up audit, because there will be. I'm assuming, Ms. Mack, and correct me if I'm wrong, the airport has been updated. The process is going to be followed going
Yes,
forward.
and I'm not saying at all don't do the audit. I just
No,
don't
no,
want
no.
on the record that, there was a violation of federal
Correct.
policy, as he said.
No, but my statement is more based off of, the correction's been made, they've course corrected, and now maybe that's an opportunity for a follow-up audit.
So it wouldn't be a follow-up audit technically.
Technically?
Technically, because there hasn't been an audit, right?
Yeah,
But I think what
Gotta do one
what I'm
too.
kind of hearing
Got it,
is
got
you're
it, got
thinking,
it.
let's give them more time and maybe we could consider this for the audit plan for next year.
That's what I'm thinking.
And then we could audit. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Is there any other thoughts on the airport, Rep. Chavez?
No, Chairman, not on the airport. But my question
Okay.
then becomes, for code compliance, before we take a vote, do we have to give Mr. Calderon more direction in
I
terms
think
of the
so.
scope of the project? So I don't know if we should move to postpone this to the next meeting while we, work through the details of that scope and then
Okay.
vote on it next time.
Okay, yeah, so it seems like there's consensus around this one. Now, what there isn't consensus on is the scope.
Right.
So let's talk about this individually with
Yes.
Mr. Calderon.
I was just going to
I'm
suggest that.
happy to offer a motion,
Yes.
Okay.
and we could kind of go from there. So I move to pick the code compliance requirements and enforcement practices for the chief internal auditor to audit in using 500 hours for the 24-25 audit plan, and bring back a scope on this next month
Some objectives. How can we get
with input from the FOAC.
Yeah, I'll conduct additional interviews with the FOAC committee, and I'll even include Ms. Mack, and
Yeah.
we'll see what objectives I can develop now that now we're going to the next level.
Yes.
And that's establishing the objectives. And we can kind of see what areas the committee would like me to focus on with input from the city manager.
Okay, and so this is not necessarily a postponement, but we're choosing this one, and then now we're bringing it back next month. So there is a motion and there's a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, this passes unanimously, and we'll have Mr. Calderon meet individually with FOAC members in this next month, and then we'll have it for discussion in the May meeting. So that brings us to the end of the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn from from Representative Nino. Is there a second? Second from Rep Chavez. So we are adjourned at 3:53 p.m. Thank you so much to everyone.
Okay.